Welcome everybody, and thanks for tuning in to today's workshop. I'm Gary Weis from SBIM, and today we'll be taking a deep dive into social selling. We'll be having a look at what's working now and the secrets to delivering value, building goodwill, and creating offers. It's 2020. It's no longer a question of should you be using social media to market and promote your business. It's actually a matter of how well you're actually going to do it. Now, it's fair to say that as a nation, we're addicted to our devices, and the total amount of screen time that the average Australian devotes to social media essentially demands that your business has to be out there amongst it all and getting your fair share of the attention. So why are some companies smashing it out of the park with social media whilst others are struggling to even join the dots? So what's the secret to making this social media world work? To understand what's working now, first we have to understand why it's working. And to do that, we need to take a quick trip down memory lane with a little history lesson. Now, here in Australia, our love affair and our addiction to screen watching, and that's screens of any size, dates way back to Melbourne in 1856. Now, that's 160 years ago when the first public movie was shown. Now, it took exactly another 100 years for television to hit the airwaves, and it all started in Sydney in 1956 with the launch of the privately owned Channel 9 and Channel 7 stations and the government-owned ABC. Now, next to join the party was good old Channel O in 1964, which we now know as Channel 10. And finally, good old SBS joined in the fun in 1980. And that's still pretty much the lineup of the Australian TV's landscape as we know it today, with a few minor exceptions, which we'll look at a little later. Now, these humble beginnings are a far cry from what we now know today as commercial or free-to-air TV. But it was the start of a revolution that the advertising industry hadn't seen since the invention of the printing press, way back in the 1440s, and also broadcast radio. That dates back to the early 1900s. So for almost 30 years, advertisers had the fairly simple choice of choosing a TV station and the relevant programs in which to place their advertising. And like today, each station had a slightly different demographic and had the programming that appealed to their target audience. Now, we've also got to remember that back in the day, a 30-second TV spot in prime time was about £60. Now that's equivalent today to about $2,000. Now the same spot today in 2020 would set you back a minimum of about $15,000. And what you've also got to remember is those prices don't include the cost of producing the ad in the first place. Now, look, at these rates, it's probably fair to say that TV advertising, both then and now, was not really geared for your average small business. So let's now fast forward to 1995, which saw the introduction into Australia of subscription TV, or as we probably better know it as pay TV or cable TV. And at the time, the dominant players in this arena were the likes of, there was Galaxy, Ozstar, Optus, and still the giant, good old Foxtel. With the launch of pay TV, we've all of a sudden now gone from just 4 free-to-air commercial channels to advertise on to now over 100 different pay TV channels to choose from. Now, these extra choice of channels allowed the advertiser to really dial in their targeting with a huge range of special interest shows to jump on the back of. And at this point, the advertiser has never had it so good. There's increased targeting and decreased costs, which really did lead to a perfect combination. All right, so now on to some recent history. And That's the launch of over-the-top media services here in Australia in 2015. So what is OTT, as it is commonly known? It's simply a service that streams content via the internet and bypasses that, the traditional cable, satellite, and broadcast platforms. Now, the number of streaming services is growing almost daily, but the market is currently dominated by the likes of Netflix, Stan, the Disney Plus, and Amazon's Prime, and for sport you've got KO. So even though right now these streaming services are not running ads, you've got to remember that when pay TV or subscription TV hit town, their war cry to bring us all in was TV without the ads. However, that didn't last real long. Look, I'm not hating, I'm just saying. So look, watch this space. And not to be left behind, the TV stations that started all this in the first place have now also jumped on board the OTT train and have a bunch of their own catch-up streaming and on-demand channels. But guess what? Don't fear. These channels are chock full of adverts to keep you entertained. So, with the exclusion of many digital and smaller community TV stations, Australia's commercial TV landscape now looks something like this. So right now, in no other time in history have we such a huge array of programming to watch. So how has all this basically changed our lives, and what's this got to do with social media and selling? So look, to explain that, we need to go back to TV for a minute and look at how TV changed our habits. Now, TV is responsible for turning us into a number of different things, but turning us into appointment viewers. And this meant if you wanted to watch a particular TV show, you had to be sitting in front of the box ready to go, or you just simply missed it. And look, this is a way of life and how families came together for years. And this was until the good old VCR or video recorder was commercially released in Australia in around 1980. All right, probably a good time to run a poll. Now, look, be honest. Who still has one of these good old VCR dinosaurs lying around the house? Now, I don't, but it wasn't so long ago that we took it to the dump. Look, we laugh now, but that clunky old, tape chewing box was in fact the biggest innovation in home entertainment since the introduction of the TV itself. Now, you could record your favourite TV shows and watch them anytime you wanted, and this was a huge shift of power away from the broadcasters and putting the powers into the hands of the consumers in terms of when we wanted to watch our favourite TV shows. Now, there's a second part. And the second part of the VCR story is just as important, as it allowed for the very first time viewers to consume blockbuster video content outside of the confines of the movie theatre. And this was another huge shift of power away from the broadcasters and into the hands of the consumer in terms of what we wanted to watch. Now, we had to wait almost 20 years for the release of the DVD player, which hit our shores in 1999. Now, this little piece of technology, it got us real excited, as we could now dial up the entertainment level with higher resolution. It had better sound, and it almost had unlimited recording time as opposed to the old clunky box that ran tapes. But at the same time, we were running down to the local Blockbuster or Video Easy store for our fix of the latest DVD releases. Another technology was brewing and about to be thrust upon us to feed our addiction to video. Now, I want you to have a look at this 18-second YouTube video.
Alright, so here we are in front of the elephants. Cool thing about these guys is that they have really long fronts, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
Now, doesn't look like much, but this video signaled the launch of YouTube in November 2005, and it basically changed the way we published and shared videos, forever. I mean, YouTube is now the second most visited website in the world. And look, our fascination with YouTube it's just massive. You know, there's 300 hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute, and we watch on average about 5 billion videos for a total of about 110 million hours a day. Now, in comparison, even though Facebook launched back in 2004, it wasn't until 2007 did they introduce video to the platform. But today, Facebook has us consuming over 8 billion videos for a total of 100 million hours a day. So it's fair to say our appetite for video is just absolutely insatiable. And with the cost of video cameras and digital devices, steadily declining during the mid-2000s to present day, we create video in record volumes and we consume it in record volumes at the lowest cost we've ever seen before. So where does all this actually leave us? It actually puts the consumer in a very, very powerful position. Because with all this technology, we're in total control of what we watch, what we create, and when we watch it like never before. Our ability to search for just the right piece of content for whatever we want and consume it where and when we want it, coupled with the power of the social media platform algorithms to learn our likes and dislikes and, based on our engagement and our viewing behavior, has pretty much meant that, whether we like it or not, everyone is receiving a customized viewing experience. So why are we spending all this time talking about TV and video? Well, the reason is because that device that you actually carry everywhere with you, your mobile phone, which is also how we consume the majority of our video content, is now the new TV. So understanding all that has come before us, we've now hit the next revolution in advertising, and in particular, social media advertising, and that is what I refer to as Channel U. So the answer to what's working right now is the execution of what we call the Channel U marketing strategy. So what does the Channel U marketing strategy actually look like? Well, there's effectively 3 main pillars to the strategy, and they are value, goodwill, and offers. And now we're going to take a quick look at each one of those individually. So how do we deliver value? Well, that's pretty simple. We do that through the content. And the fastest way to make your content and the most effective content, as you probably guessed it by the intro, is video. So when we look at creating your video content, the goal is always to deliver the value. Now, value can come in a whole pile of shapes and sizes in a lot of different ways. It typically looks like tips and tricks or checklists, top 10s, news, the latest hack. It can be commentary. In fact, anything really that you're sharing that someone else will find interesting and of value. So what's the goodwill part? Well, it's the culmination or the sum of the value that you've built through sharing your content. Now, goodwill in marketing terms is also commonly referred to as the know, like, and trust indicator. So the more value you deliver, the more goodwill you build, and the more people will get to know, like, and trust you. It all goes hand in hand. So what about the third point? And that's offers. Well, the offers concept is where we're going to spend a little bit of time on, as it's probably the least understood and the area that I tend to see businesses getting wrong the most when they're using social media. Now, I think the best way I can put it, and the straightest that I can call it, is social media is not the place to be hard selling. The selling is actually done during a sales process, not at the value and goodwill building stage, which is the social media itself. Your prospects need to go through the value and goodwill stages before they're going to buy anyway. So don't be tempted to speed things up and put the cart before the horse and go after the sale before you've built your value and the goodwill. So think of the offer as an invitation. In the context of the Channel U strategy, it's an invitation to engage with your business either via your website or social channel, or in fact, it can be any other online asset. It can even be a physical store, or it can be a phone call for that matter. So think of it as an invitation to enter into your sales process, okay? Now, the best use of offers I've ever seen is actually the shopping channels. They're absolute masters at making offers. Now, if you get a chance, the next time you're in front of the TV, tune into our shopping channel and look, just check out how the presenters move effortlessly from talking about the product and then segue into an offer and then out again and then back to talking about the product. It really is an art form and one that you can quite easily master. Now, we're going to look at how to make an effective offer when we look at the video story framework a little bit later in this video. So the type of offer that you come up with will depend on what your sales process actually is. So for the example we'll be running today, we'll be including a website address in our offer as our sales process entry point. Now, the interesting part of doing this for many different Channel U campaigns that we've run is the amount of website traffic that this type of soft offer can actually generate. Now, let me explain this a little bit more. When you use a website address in an offer, you'll be able to see how many people actually remember and use that address to hit your website. Now, if you look inside your website's Google Analytics, you'll see the acquisitions section, and then there's a metric called direct traffic. Now, this is simply people typing your website address directly into their browser. Now, they didn't click on a link somewhere. They arrived by typing in the URL directly of your page. Now, as I mentioned before, we'll be running through a live example, and when we looked at the Google Analytics data for that campaign, it clearly showed the number of website visitors the soft offers were actually generating. We could tell it was from the Channel U strategy we were running, as there was nowhere else other than the video content that we were running on Facebook did we even mention the specific web address. And in this particular case, we used wpbutler.com.au/sitecare. We actually used an internal page as the landing page for the campaign and not the home page of the website. Now, there was certainly direct traffic to the home page of the site, but the direct traffic to that internal page had to have come from the campaign. There was just no other way that someone would have known to directly type in that address. So the tip here is to make sure that you're using a relatively short website address that your viewers can easily remember. You can use a phone number, but it doesn't make for a great soft offer, as phone numbers are usually difficult to remember unless you have a really short 1300 number or something that's really catchy. So as we move through the Channel U strategy, just keep in mind that our goal is to constantly deliver value, build the goodwill, and make invitations for people to enter into our sales process via the soft offers. We're not looking to hard sell here. We will, however, look at where in the Channel U strategy we use a harder or more direct response type of offer, but we only ever use these harder direct offers after we've built the value and the goodwill. From talking with hundreds of clients over the years, I can tell you the number one problem or objection I hear from business owners, or what they're dealing with when creating video, is what to actually say. The secret behind knowing what to say is using a proven framework. Now, let me just explain a framework. Now, a framework is different to a script. A script is usually delivered word for word and is very, very precise. Now, the problem with using scripts is your focus is typically drawn towards delivering the script perfectly, instead of focusing on communicating and getting your message across. So, you're typically so worried about making it perfect that, all the character and emotion gets left out, and you can sort of come across to being a little robotic. A framework, however, on the other hand, is like using a series of signposts to just keep you on track. As long as you know the order of the signposts, you can deliver your content confidently without having to script it out word for word. So what I'm going to share with you now is what we call our video story framework. And I'm going to run you through a real live example of this, and it goes something like this. Now, remember, what we're trying to do here is to get our viewers' attention. And we do this by using a technique called a dog whistle. Now, we all know what a dog whistle is, so I won't go into explaining that, but the concept here is to call out your audience. Now, this works because we're all trained to filter out noise. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever had this experience, but you can be in a crowded room at, say, a party. You're deep in conversation at one end of the room and someone else is at the other end of the room and says your name just in conversation. And you clearly hear it over all the noise without even consciously listening for your name. That's the principle of the dog whistle at work. So the dog whistle structure starts out like this, with either are you, do you, or would you? Now we're just essentially asking a question to call out our customer. Now what we then do is attach either a pain or gain point, a market, a demographic, or a situation on the back end of that question. So to set the scene, in our live example, SBIM has another company that specialises in WordPress monthly site care packages called WP Butler. So our dog whistle using this framework looks something like this. Are you a WordPress website owner, fed up with plugin updates crashing your site? If so, then stick around. So in that live example, we used are you. Are you a WordPress website owner? Followed by a pain point. Fed up with plugin updates crashing your site? Now, you've now got your customers' attention, but you have to draw them in just a little bit further. And this is where we move on to the next signpost, which is the intro. Now, the intro is made up of several components and it goes something like this. Hi, I'm your name from your company, and we help, you describe who, just like you, broad result and pillar. So to break that down, so your name and company should be fairly straightforward. Now, the describe you lets you either define even further or reinforce again who you're calling out to. And the broad result part is what's in it for them. So how is your audience going to benefit by listening to you, basically? The next piece of the intro is the pillar, and this is simply the key product or service that your business offers that solves the problem you're actually addressing. So it should be one short, clear sentence that clearly outlines how you're going to help your customer. Now, the final part of the intro is the topic and the result, the specific result. And the topic is exactly that, a concise explanation of what you're about to cover, followed by the specific result that your topic is going to cover. Now, the specific result needs to be crystal clear, as this is what's going to keep your viewer listening. Again, it just needs to be one short, punchy sentence, and that's all that's required, nothing longer. So in our live example, it goes something like this. Hi, I'm Gary from WP Butler, and we help WordPress website owners just like you take the hassle out of maintaining your website. Today we're going to be talking about plugin updates and how to go about doing it safely so you don't crash your site. All right, on to the next section, and this is where we put the first of our offers in. Now, as we've discussed before, these are what we call soft offers, okay? So remember, you're not trying to sell anything here. That's one of the big mistakes. You're simply giving the viewer an instruction or call to action that will hopefully lead them into your sales process. Now, there are plenty of ways to segue into an offer, but I personally like the before we get started line. It's nice and simple and easy to get out. And the offer, when you put it all together, looks something like this. But before we get started, if you like, need, want, think, etc., result, then take this action. So in short, all you're saying is, if you want this result, then do this. Okay, it's pretty simple. So over to our live WP Butler example, it would go all together and sound something like this. But before we get started, if you'd like to dramatically reduce the amount of time and money you're spending on website maintenance, then visit wpbutler.com.au/site care. There you'll find a range of monthly site care packages that will allow you to get back to doing more important things like running your business. Okay, look, that's pretty simple. And again, no hard sells. It's just a soft call to action designed to get people into your sales process. Okay, on to the next signpost. It's the intro to result and frustration. And it looks something like this. So, describe who. Again, you can define even further or reinforce, again, who you're calling out to. Come to, me or your company. Because they, and this is where we highlight a pain, gain, want, or need to get a result. So if we pull all that together, our live example would go something like this. So WordPress website owners come to WP Butler because they're sick and tired of dealing with what seems to be an endless parade of plugin updates, and they just want a simple, easy way to deal with them without wasting time and running the risk of their website crashing during the process. All right, again, that's it. It's short and it's pretty sweet, and it's not much more than just one sentence. It's all you'll need to cover that whole entire section. All right, the next signpost is where we get to inject some emotion. And this is our chance to really connect with our viewer in showing that we really understand how they're currently feeling. And this section goes something like this. And they often tell me they feel insert emotions because insert pain. And if we look at our live example, it'd go something like this. And they often tell me they feel nervous and stressed about doing the plugin update because of the risk of the site being offline and the impact it can have on their business, like loss of leads or online sales. Again, that's it. Nice, short, and sweet. All right, we're now up to the point signpost. And this is literally the shortest of all the signposts, but definitely one of the most important ones. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the point and the reason it's critical to get this bit right. The point is the message. It's the core of what you're trying to say. It's basically the one-liner that your entire piece of video content it could essentially or basically be distilled down to. It's the single focus point. So if you have to write a one-line summary, this would be it. So spend time on really crafting a solid point, because this is what's going to carry the remainder of the video story framework. So the point framework is simply, so I tell them the point. If we look at the WP Butler live example, it'd go something like this. So I tell them, you've got to follow a plugin update process. You can't just approach it randomly and hope for the best. Okay, on to the next signpost in the framework, and it's another offer. It's exactly the same structure as before, but I tend to use the by the way segue into this offer and make it really short. So in our live example, the WP Butler example, it would be, by the way, if you want someone to take care of your website maintenance, then visit wpbutler.com.au/site care and check out our monthly site care packages. Alrighty, The next signpost in our video story framework is the story itself. And the story is, it's what's wrapped around the point and it carries your message. Now there's a great little metaphor, I love this one, that explains this, and it's called the baloney principle. Now, bear with me. If you've either got a cat or a dog, at some point in time you've had to feed it a pill of some sort. Now, if your pets are much like mine, that can sometimes turn into a real ordeal. I mean, look, little Fluffy can get really stubborn when having someone forcibly stuff a pill down its throat. However, when you wrap that very same pill in a piece of meat or their favourite little treat, it's pretty much game over, down the hatch it goes. So think of that pill, think of the pill as the message, and think of the story as the piece of meat. Your story has to carry your message. There are two parts to the story. The first part is the story itself, and the second part is the value, which is the advice or the tip or the hack, whatever you want to call it, the piece of value that you're delivering. And one of the more common questions that I get asked is, how long should the story actually be? And the answer is always the same, and that is as long as it needs to be. It needs to be as long as it needs to be to get your point across. Now, if you can do that in one sentence, look, then go for it. If it's going to take several paragraphs, then look, that's fine too. But just remember, always focus on the point, all right? So when stories get long-winded, often the point is lost, and if that happens, you end up losing your audience. So think of it this way. We've all been to a party where someone just goes on and on and on and on about something and ends up on some other tangent and then somehow manages to start a whole new entire other story, without even finishing the first one or the first story that they started in the first place. In short, don't be that person. Just don't be that person. Probably the biggest tip I can give you about this section of the story signpost is this. Use the story to really, really, really highlight the pain or gain that your viewer is either experiencing right now or would like to experience in the future. So in our live WP Butler example, the story goes like this. And remember to reinforce your point with the story. So the story goes like this. I was recently talking to a lady from Sydney who was in a fair bit of distress as her website had crashed after she'd updated all the plugins. She'd opened up the plugins tab in the menu and proceeded to run down the list and ticked all the plugins that needed updating, and then she casually hit the update button. Now this bulk update process is not uncommon. We hear of this sort of thing going on all the time. You may have done it yourself. The problem, however, is when updating in bulk, unless your server has the resources to do all the updates in a single hit, the server usually runs out of processing power and hangs, causing the site to go down. Okay, so that was the first part of the story. Now, the second part of the story is where you get to directly address that pain or gain point that you raised at the very beginning of your video. So remember right back to the beginning. And this is where you deliver the value. Again, this is your tip, your trick or your hack, or put another way, this is your golden piece of advice that you want to share. So in our live WP Butler example, it would sound something like this. So the first thing you should be doing before any plugin updates is take a backup of your site. Because if anything goes wrong, you can always roll the site back to the last stable version. The second step is to update the plugins in order of functionality. There are many back-end plugins like SEO, reporting, and administration plugins that have little impact on the front-end functions of your website. Always do these first. Thirdly, update functionality plugins one at a time and then check the site for operation after each update. Doing it this way is a little slower, but it will instantly tell you if a plugin update has conflicted with another plugin or even your theme. Finally, when all plugins are updated, go through each and every function of the site and make sure it is all working as it should be. Now, if you have e-commerce, make sure to test your checkout thoroughly. All right, I hope you got all that. So just remember, the key point is to keep this story section as punchy as you possibly can. And the way to do that is to stick to the point and look, don't hold back. Don't be afraid, and don't hold back on the value. You know, be as abundant and as generous as you possibly can. Okay, on to the next video story framework signpost, and that is the metaphor. Now, the metaphor is my favorite piece of the whole entire framework. And this is where you get to be really, really creative. So what exactly is a metaphor? Now, straight out of the dictionary, a metaphor is a figure of speech that is used to make a comparison between two things that aren't alike, but do have something in common. If you think about the conversations you have on a daily basis, particularly the conversations where you're trying to explain something to somebody else, you'll find that you're probably more often than not, you're likely to be using metaphors all the time in getting your message across. It's very, very common. Think of a metaphor as, I don't know, the icing on the cake of your story. Now remember, good storytellers are always using metaphors. That's what makes them good storytellers. Now there are plenty of ways to segue into a metaphor, but here are a few of my favorites, and they go like this. So think of it this way, look at it this way, think of it like this. Another way to view this is. So if we now look at our W.P. Butler live metaphor example, we use the think of it like this segue, and it sounds like this. Think of it like this. When a mechanic services your car, they'll follow an ordered checklist of items that they must pay attention to. They don't just start wherever they feel like it and randomly, or even worse, from memory, just go about tinkering with your engine, your brakes, your steering and your suspension. They have a process. They also don't just run through the service and not test drive the car at the end. It's always driven after the service to make sure it's running smoothly. All right, hope you got all that. On to our next signpost, which is the summary. Now, the summary is the final opportunity to really, really drive home your point. And the summary segue is, look, it's really, really, really simple. It's just in summary, ... So in our live W.P. Butler example, it goes something like this. So, just like the mechanic who follows a detailed ordered checklist when you service your car, the same goes for taking care of your plugin updates. You need to follow a process or things are bound to go wrong and you risk spending even more time and money in getting your website fixed. So, over the years, there's been many, many studies done on speeches and speech writers. And the most common elements in these speech formulas are point, story, metaphor, and summary. So just remember, this formula has, I don't know, it stood the test of time and it's a great structure to deliver, you know, any key message, not just your video story framework. So look, use it whenever you get a chance, okay? At this point in the video story framework, we get to deliver our final offer. Again, the formula for the offer is the same as it was before, and then look, there are plenty of segues you can use, but I really like the if you're really serious about. Now that's a great little segue. In our W.P. Butler live example, it'd sound something like this. If you're really serious about keeping your website plugins up to date and keeping your site from going down, or even worse, getting hacked, then jump on to wpbutler.com.au/sitecare and check out our site care packages and let the team at W.P. Butler take the hassle out of maintaining your website with our tried and tested internal processes and checklists. The final signpost of the video framework is the close, and it's a two-parter. Now, the close is actually really important to set up the next video in your series. And this is where you get to set up and create a sense of expectation around your next video and hopefully draw your viewers further towards your brand. So the formula for the close part one is simply this. Next time, we're going to take a look at pillar and pain point and how you can result. The second part of the close is the wrap up. Now, there's plenty of ways that you can phrase this, but I always like to suggest that people like and share the video. I look at it this way: if you don't ask them, you might not get. And look, hopefully your video was chock full of value and people would just naturally want to share it. But look, it doesn't hurt to give them a gentle nudge. So the wrap up might go something like this. Until then, thanks for watching. And if you like this or you know someone who would find this also helpful, then please feel free to like and share. See you next time. Now, the wrap-up will pretty much work on most social media platforms, but again, feel free to play around with it. And look, don't be afraid to put your own little spin on it. As an example, when I do this for the W.P. Butler brand, I throw in at the very end. And don't forget, take it back up and stay WordPress. Now, it sounds a little cheesy, but I own it. So now that we've looked at the video story framework to create your video content, we now need to look at how to get your video in front of your audience. And to do that, we need to promote your video content. So I'm going to run through with you now how to set up the Channel U strategy using Facebook. Now, you can use any other social media channel with this strategy, but for the constraints of time here, we'll focus now just on Facebook. If you want to know more about how to do this on other platforms, just hit me up when we get to the Q&A section. All right. To do this, I want you to think of Facebook as a pay-to-play platform. Don't think of it as a free social media platform. Think of it as a paid content delivery system. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting in any way that you stop using Facebook organically, but the Channel U strategy works best by harnessing the amazing power of the Facebook ads platform to deliver your video content to a broad audience. So why do I say that? The problem with posting content organically on Facebook is just simply reach. On average, only about 5 to 6% of your page's followers will actually ever see your post in the first place. So think of organic posts as a great way to keep your existing audience and customers up to date with what's going on with your business. But for now, don't think of it as a scalable customer acquisition strategy. And the key word there is scalable. All right, so unlike TV advertising where you have to pay for all your ads up front with no real guarantee that anyone's actually going to sit still long enough to take any notice of your ad in the first place, with Facebook we can take advantage of a certain ad delivery method called throughplay. So what's a throughplay? So straight from Facebook itself, throughplay is an optimization and billing option for video ads through the video views objective. Throughplay allows advertisers to optimize and choose to pay only for ads that are played to completion for videos shorter than 15 seconds. For longer videos, Throughplay optimizes and bills for ads that are played for at least 15 seconds. And this option is available with auction or reach and frequency campaigns. So I just want you to think about that for a minute. What Facebook is actually saying to you is that you only pay for the ad if someone shows interest in what you're saying by watching your content for a minimum of 15 seconds. Now, if they're watching 15 seconds of your content, then I'd say that they're pretty interested in what you've got to say. Now, to highlight how powerful this is, how powerful the throughplay is, I want you to think for a moment and think of your own Facebook viewing behavior. And to do this, let me set the scene. If you're like most people, you'll pick up your phone and jump on Facebook multiple times a day. You're scrolling your feed and stopping at points that grab your attention along the way. Look, there's nothing unusual there. Now, ask yourself, when was the last time you actually watched something in your Facebook feed or any social media platform for that matter that you didn't actually want to continue to watch? Now, it's not like TV or Foxtel. We aren't forced to sit through the ads to get back to our scrolling. We basically don't have to watch the ads anymore in our feeds. That's if we don't want to. You'll only tend to watch the ads if you're interested in them or they catch your attention for some reason. Now, this phenomenon of watching only what we want to watch, we call self-selection. So, as consumers, we're selecting what we want to watch. We're no longer being, force-fed or being confined to a programming schedule. Now, 15-second through play might not sound like a whole lot of time, but trust me, on Facebook and social media, it really is. Now, to prove this, I want you to do a quick exercise with me. If your mobile phone is in front of you, pick it up, and when I say go, I want you to look at your mobile screen until I say stop. All right, ready, go. Okay, stop. You just looked at your phone for 15 seconds. That's the length of a through play. So think of how much information you can actually convey in 15 seconds if you really put your mind to it. So this is why the 15-second through play, in conjunction with the dog whistle, the intro and the initial offer in the video framework that we went through, and getting that opening to your video just right is one of the absolute keys to this channel use strategy. And that's why we've spent a fair bit of time going through the framework piece by piece so you can get all of this just right. So let's try another exercise. Let's say that your piece of video content is 2 minutes long. And look, in my experience running many of these styles of campaigns, 2 minutes is not an overly long piece of content. So this exercise I want you to do is think about, so on a scale of 1 to 10, think about how interested you think somebody would be if they watched all 2 minutes of your video. So while you're at it, think about 1 minute 30, which is 75%, or 1 minute, which is 50%, and 25%, which is 30 seconds. So typically when we do this exercise, the feedback is unsurprisingly, much the same, and it looks like this. 100% equals a 10 out of 10 interest level, 75% equals a 7.5 out of 10 interest level, 50% equals 5 out of 10, and 25% equals 2.5 out of 10. Now, these scores aren't an indication as to whether someone is going to buy anything at this point. It's simply an indication of their interest in what you have to say. Now remember, you need to build value, and you need to build goodwill, and that usually happens over multiple touch points with your content. Now, with the power of the analytics and reporting inside the Facebook Ads Manager, you'll be able to tell not only how many people watched your video, but how many people watched your video to a certain point in time. This information it's absolutely gold, and it's another key to the channel use strategy. Now, we're going to come back and look at what to do with this information in a minute, but first, let's look at how to go about setting all this up inside of the Facebook Ads Manager. All right, so let's take a look. Now, due to limited time, I'm going to just talk about the key setup points. Again, if you've got any questions, any specific questions about how to do all this, again, just hit me up in the Q&A session. So the first thing you need to do when inside the Facebook Ads Manager is create a new campaign and then select the campaign objective. Now here you'll want to select the video views marketing objective. Now, next we look at setting up the ad sets and our audience targeting. Now, remember back a little bit, I was talking about self-selection in terms of us only really watching, what we want. This is a really important concept to understand when it comes to selecting your targeting for your campaign. Now, for as long as marketing has been around, we've had it just drummed into us that you need to target your advertising. Now, I'm certainly not disagreeing with this holy pillar of advertising and marketing. However, I'll explain why only part of it is actually relevant in this strategy. So when you set your audience up in the campaign ad set, you'll still need to use some of the basic targeting like location, age, gender, or language if that's applicable. But what you don't want to do is enter in any detailed targeting. Now, I can already hear the screams, and that's okay. I'll explain why. If the audience is self-selecting and you only pay if someone watches a minimum of 15 seconds, then it doesn't really matter who you put your ad in front of or your content. Your audience will self-select to watch it. Now, that's a really critical concept to understand. Now, I have the Facebook traditionalists, all the time challenge me on this, no targeting strategy. And look, that's okay. I'm happy for them to continue to buy their ad spots at, a more expensive rate, and that's all good. I say that because the more detailed the audience targeting, the higher the price of the ad spot. The reason for that is actually quite simple. If you hadn't noticed, Facebook typically only shows a list of 25 suggested targeted demographics, interest or behaviours when you select an audience. And guess what? They're the same 25 for absolutely everybody. Therefore, what tends to happen is that when you use targeting, you end up targeting the same set of audiences as all your competitors, and you end up fighting for that same limited amount of ad spots. Therefore, what happens is the price is higher the more targeted the audience. So with the no audience method, you are advertising to the widest possible audience at the cheapest possible rate. Now, having said all that, if you're absolutely not convinced and you're really compelled and you want to use a targeted audience, then look, make sure you only use just one or two. Don't be going and sticking in a stack of audiences, okay? Keep it broad and let the audience self-select, okay? The next section to set up is the placements. Again, based on experience, we find for the video view campaigns, the best placements are the Facebook newsfeed, the Instagram feed, Facebook video feeds, and both the Facebook and Instagram stories. Now, I typically go ahead and turn off all the other placements. However, look, please feel free to play around with your placements to suit your campaigns and how you want to run it. And finally, we have the optimization and delivery settings. Now, these are pretty simple. Just make sure you have the through play drop-down box selected, and there's another through play radio button that needs checking next to when you get charged. And look, that's just about it for setup. Now, I know I skimmed over that, and there's clearly more to setting up a Facebook campaign than what I just ran through there, but these are the key settings for running the no targeting strategy inside the channel use strategy. So now that you've got your first piece of content set up and running, I want to jump back to the Facebook analytics and reporting I was talking about before, because we're going to use that information for the next part of the channel use strategy. Now, once your video content piece is up and running, you're quickly going to be able to see how many people have actually watched your ad or your content through to which point. So using this data, we're now going to start showing those people that qualified another piece of your content. In other words, we're going to show them another video. So the keyword I used there was qualify. So what does qualify exactly mean? Now, Based on the view length segments that we covered before, you know, the 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%, we can select who we want to show another video to. So, for example, I set up an entirely new ad set in the existing campaign to show people who have viewed a minimum of, say, 50% of the video. Now, you can select all the people who watched a minimum of 15 seconds or even 3 seconds if you wish. But for the best results, we tend to set the next video in the series to show to people who've watched at least a minimum of 25%. Now, which segment you use, it's entirely up to you and is also determined by the actual length of the original video, the length of the first video. So just remember here that just because someone only watched, say, 15 seconds of your 2-minute video doesn't mean that they weren't really interested. It just means that on this occasion of seeing your piece of content on your ad, they chose, for whatever reason, not to watch the video for any longer. Now, that's where frequency then comes in, or the discussion around frequency, but that's a discussion for another time. So what we're essentially doing is only showing our second piece of content to people who showed interest to a certain point of your first video. Now, if we drew this out, it'd look something like this. So what's happening is that each time we show a new video, we're only showing it to the audience that engaged with the previous video. So what's happening here is your audience is getting smaller each time, but it's getting more and more targeted. The audience is getting more interested as they go along because you're doing the 3 pillars. You're building value, you're building goodwill, and you're making offers. Again, the 3 pillars of the channel news strategy. So the final part of the strategy is where we now cash in on the value and goodwill that you've built up by showing your content and all those soft offers that you've been making. Now, the final piece of content is what we call a traditional direct response advert. Now, we don't typically use video content here, but you can if you wish. What we tend to do is use an image that is consistent with the video content that we've been running. So basically they look the same. This static ad signals the end of the content series. Now you can make the series as long as you like, but what we've found is that 3 videos and a final direct response ad tends to work the best. Now, a series of content like this is usually confined to a single product or a single service. Now, if you've got multiple products or services in your business, all you do is you simply run multiple video content series. And you can run them at the same time if you want. We call that campaign stacking. Now, what we often do is using the audience you've already built up in the first campaign or the first video content series, we launch a new content series to that same audience that's already engaged in your content. This is now called your warm audience. And then what we do, we also show the new series to an entirely new cold audience. And we keep repeating that process for all new video content series. So by doing this, what you end up doing is constantly building an audience that is showing interest in your content and leveraging those audiences. So when you string this channel news strategy all together, at any point during the 3 videos, your audience may choose to reach out and contact you or enter into your sales process. But remember, what you're really doing is you're building value and building goodwill and then cashing that in with the final direct response ad. Now, this is where you'll typically find most of your business will come in that direct response ad. So you've got to be a little patient. So in wrapping up, I want you to have fun with creating your video content. Look, don't worry about how you're going to come across on camera. Just be yourself and be natural. If you happen to stuff it up, just delete it and go again. But be sure to follow that video story framework. Look, don't be afraid to play around with it just a little bit. But again, look, just have fun with it. So I hope you found all that helpful, and look, best of luck with implementing the channel use strategy. Okay, I think that just about covers it. Thanks so much for sticking around. Steve, we might open it up now for some Q&A.